Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video I'm going to go through 10 trashy horror movies that I think are actually really good, or they at least have some kind of identifiable merit, which when I watch them I think they did that really well. So we'll get straight into it. These are just in alphabetical order, it's not a countdown as such, but the first film is Blood for Dracula. So this stars Udo Kier as Count Dracula, and in this film he is running low on blood, he's running low on his life force. So he's travelling around, I think it's Italy, he's travelling around the Italian countryside, and he meets this esteemed count, this guy who offers him hospitality and lets him stay in his castle. And also this count, this nobleman, he has about 4 or 5 daughters. So Count Dracula thinks, I'll get in with these guys and I will marry one of these daughters and I'll have a wife and I'll have a new supply of blood. And his wife needs to be a virgin, which all these women are. But unfortunately for the Count, Joe D'Alessandro keeps coming around and scuppering his plans to marry a virgin woman, shall we say. It's a very silly storyline, but on the other hand, it's a beautiful film. It's a film with some stark contrasts. It is very lurid, and it has a fair bit of blood and violence in it, but at the same time, it manages to ooze a lot of class and has this beautiful aristocratic feel to it, mainly owing to the really nice locations and the regality of the characters involved. Also, Udo Kier's performance again is one of contrast. He's quite over the top in the film, and he hams it up quite a lot throughout, but at the same time he gives a really good performance, and there's a tragic desperation to his character which elicits quite a bit of sympathy for him, really, which more so than what these kind of Euro horror films usually tend to do. So, and also Blood for Dracula, it's a film that I absolutely love, but I never hear anyone else talk about it, never hear anyone mention this one, so I wanted to include this one on this list today. So, first movie, Blood for Dracula. Very trashy, but at the same time very classy. Okay, next up is Blood Rage, which could easily be kind of dismissed as a throwaway 80s slasher film. But what I think separates this one is they fashion a really good story into this movie. I'm trying to keep it simple because it's kind of difficult to explain. It's 2 twin brothers, one of whom brutally murders somebody as a kid, but they frame it on the other twin. So the other twin, the innocent one, gets taken away to an institution for years, and then years later when they're grown up, he gets released. Everyone's a little bit uncertain because they think he's a murderer. Meanwhile, the other twin, he's been living just normally as this sort of charming everyday guy. But as his brother is released, the other twin starts killing people again in order for people to think that it's the other brother that is the killer all along. And there's a really interesting character dynamic of the character who's come from the institution, who's shouting and ranting and everything. He's the good guy, whereas the everyday nice charming guy is actually the killer. It's really interesting how they fashion this into the film. I've not explained it all that eloquently, but it works, and they do a good job getting this over as the film progresses. And it's also a very good slasher film, and it's a very fun movie too, so definitely worth checking out. But like I say, that character dynamic that they create in this film is very interesting, and they do a really good job in developing that throughout the film. So it is Blood Rage. Okay, next up, another 80s slasher. This time we have Bloody Moon. So I thought I would include this. It's a Jess Franco film, and I tend to bash Jess Franco a lot on this channel. I'm not a big fan of his films, but this movie is probably my favourite by him. This is probably the most enjoyable film that he's done, in my opinion. It's very trashy, probably the trashiest film on this list, but in terms of a slasher film, it really delivers, and the slasher elements in this film are very strong. It's got some really good kill scenes, it's got some inventive deaths in this one. The acting is terrible, the dialogue is awful, but because this is an entertaining film, that kind of just adds to the fun of watching this one. So credit to Jess Franco. It's no masterpiece, but as slasher films go, it's quite effective in that kind of remit. So I thought I'd include this one and give Jess Franco a bit of a break. So that's that one. Okay, next up, one of my favourite movies of all time is The Deadly Spawn. And this is a fantastic example of trashy, low-budget filmmaking, but a film that you can tell has a lot of love and care has gone into it, and the end result for me is a fantastic piece of work. So this is about these giant, like, tadpole monsters. They come from space, they root themselves in the cellar of this house, and anyone that's unfortunate to go down there gets killed by the deadly spawn. Very low budget, very trashy, kind of amateurish, but there's a number of things in this that they do really well and that really work. I think the creature looks amazing. Yes, it's a big rubber puppet monster, but it looks great. It's got rows and rows of teeth. It looks really ferocious. It moves around quite well, and it gets lots of screen time, which is a big win, in my opinion. The film's also very gory, and you don't really get that with kind of creature features. They usually don't deliver that much gore and blood that the Deadly Spawn does, and it really doesn't hold back in that area, which is fantastic. I like the characters and the kid who likes horror films. That's a nice little nod towards the horror genre. And also the ending of this film is amazing. If you've not seen The Deadly Spawn, watch it just for the ending. It's way more epic than it should be. So yeah, like I say, one of the best examples of trashy low-budget filmmaking, but a hugely enjoyable film. I kind of put this in the same category as like Evil Dead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those sort of low-budget movies that came out and made a big impact on the horror genre. Deadly Spawn for me is easily as good as those films and is just such a fun film to watch. So that one had to make the list. Right, next up is Deranged. So this is one that I first watched when I was a kid, and I really didn't like it. I didn't like the style of this one at all, but over the years, after a few viewings, it's grown on me quite a lot, and I've come to really respect what they did with this film, despite it being very low budget and very trashy. So this tells the story of Ed Gein, the famous serial killer, played here by Robert Blossom, who does a really good job. And this won't be for everyone. It's a very slow-paced film, very downbeat, very sombre account of this guy and how he was and who he was and the events that led him to, first of all, start grave robbing and then go full-on into killing people. And what I like about this, why I would recommend it and what I think sets it apart from the usual low-budget trash, is that I feel they tried to do something different with this one. They went in a bit of a different direction, so it's not kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre in your face. It's a very kind of reserved, sort of slow-paced character study of this deeply disturbed person. And as the film kind of plays out, a lot of the time what will happen is it will stop, and then suddenly this guy will just walk onto scene and start dropping facts and narrating us through what happened. So it's almost a little bit like a documentary in places. Quite ahead of its time in a way, really, for the kind of movie that it is. So although it is rather slow-paced and downbeat, I do like that they tried to do something different, and that's it's resonated with me a bit more over the years. So kind of wanted to just mention that in this video. So that is Deranged. Okay, next up is The Horror of Party Beach, and this is a really fun creature feature movie from the early 60s. So another one, very kind of low budget, trashy, but it really does a few things well. Principally the monsters and the creatures in it. They don't look great, they look a little bit laughable. However, this movie really does go for it in terms of the kills and the death scenes. When the monsters come out and grab people and start attacking them, it's rather violent for an early 60s creature feature movie. And it's a very pleasing mix of kind of like just 60s cheese. So there's a lot of scenes that look like they've come from a Beach Boys music video. But then in contrast to that, when the monsters come out and people start getting killed, it does have some surprisingly good violent scenes that frankly could rival a lot of the creature feature films from the 80s. So this is definitely worth a look, and there are times in this film, despite its sort of 60s jovialness, they really do a good job in that creature violence kind of way. I've always looked at this film as an early precursor to Humanoids from the Deep. It's a very similar story, very similar plot. These sea monster creatures coming out to attack a seaside carnival thing. Very similar kind of film. So if you like Humanoids from the Deep and you want to see like a 60s, a similar 60s kind of film, definitely check out Horror at Party Beach. It does deliver when it comes to the creatures. So kudos to that movie. Okay, next up, the next trashy film that is actually really good is The House on Straw Hill. So yeah, this one is this has got a lot of kind of hidden depth to it. I think I've watched this numerous times, and the plot of this one always intrigues me. It was also released as Expose. It's just a bootleg copy of it there, and it can kind of be sort of dismissed a little bit as like a sort of like a softcore type of throwaway movie. It does star Fiona Richmond, who was synonymous with those kind of movies in the 70s, but there's a lot more going on in this movie than just that, and it's a very intriguing horror film. So it stars Udo Kier. He's a writer. He's got this house in the countryside. He's married to Fiona Richmond, and he hires a secretary played by Linda Hayden. And there's obviously something about this secretary. She's got a dark secret, or there's something that we don't know. We learn that along the way. And yeah, it's a very interesting, twisty-turny film. Like I say, easily to dismiss it as kind of just a sort of an adult type movie with sort of Fiona Richmond and Linda Hayden, but they give great performances, and it really does keep you guessing, this one. Interestingly as well, it's the only British horror movie to feature on the Video Nasties list, and it was put on there because of a rape scene sort of quarter of the way into the film. But yeah, like I say, easily dismissed as kind of something else, but very intriguing horror film. Definitely one that I would recommend. Right, next up is Nightbeast, which I absolutely love. Nightbeast is one of my all-time favourite monster movies. It just does it so well. Trashy, of course, because it's on this list, but done in such a loving way to creature features that it's really a joy to watch. My favourite thing about Nightbeast as a creature feature fan is within about a minute, the Nightbeast is on screen. He's chasing people, he's disintegrating them with a laser gun, he's pulling out people's guts. It just begins straight away. There's no kind of hiding him away or anything like that. It just gets straight into it. And credit to Don Dola, who did this amongst other similar movies. He really had no problem in getting the creatures out there on screen, which is just fantastic. So yeah, Nightbeast is very cheesy, very low budget, very amateurish in a way, but I have a lot of respect for the film because, like I say, they had no qualms in just throwing the Nightbeast out there, having him kill people. The effects are pretty good. The Nightbeast looks pretty cool. So yeah, if you like mindless B-movie creature features, Nightbeast is one of the very best examples of that. I love this film. Always have fun watching it. Okay, next up is Tenement. So another film that I never hear anybody talk about, and this is a really good, really effective movie. It's very similar to like Assault on Precinct 13, but in a big apartment block. They have these like drug gangs terrorizing the neighborhood, and one day the tenants of this building they make a stand and they call the police and they get them arrested. But a few hours later, the gang is back out on the streets, and they come back to the apartment block to take revenge on the tenants. And this movie, it's a really well-made movie, very gripping kind of filmmaking, but it really does deliver in terms of the violence. It's a pretty violent movie. I think it was something about it was too violent to be rated. The controversial urban horror that landed an X rating for graphic violence in 1985. And yeah, it's a pretty mean-spirited movie. There's a number of scenes in this that are quite strong, quite violent, and the gang members, they sort of break into the building and work their way up the building, taking out the tenants until they sort of start to fight back. So a very good film, and like I say, never hear anyone mention this one, and it's definitely worth a watch. So thought I would include that one. Okay, and last up on the list, the last trashy movie that I think is really good, and I'm probably really going to have to try and fight my case on this one, and that is Zombie Lake. So, right, why do I like Zombie Lake? I often ask myself the same question. Zombie Lake is not a good movie. It's very, very dull, very dreary. The plot doesn't really make sense. The zombies look terrible. The zombies have this like green face paint, and whenever they attack anyone, their face paint kind of gets smeared off them and ends up more on the actors rather than the zombies, which is just stupid. But for some reason, I find this movie very, very aesthetically pleasing to watch. So even though it's a terrible movie, I gotta give them credit. The cinematography in this film is absolutely beautiful. It's filmed in, I think it's France, filmed in like the French countryside around this really picturesque lake in the woods, and in this little town which has some beautiful architecture and things like that. But there's something about this movie that, like I say, aesthetically it's wonderful. It's like, watching this movie is like going for a walk in the countryside in the summer. And it's very quiet, nothing happens, you just like to stand around and look and take it in. And that's what this movie is like. So that's a very, very strange way to explain the movie. I am aware of that, but something about this film is very pleasing to watch. Like I say, it's a terrible horror film. The zombies are terrible. It's boring. But that cinematography, man, is really, really good. It's beautiful and quite rare in these kind of movies. One fact that I absolutely love about this film is Jess Franco was originally hired to make the movie, but he pulled out because the budget was too small, which tells you something. If Jess Franco thinks there's not enough money involved in a movie, then it must be bad. So Gene Rowling took over. But so yeah, so they are 10 films that are very trashy, but I personally think are very good. So let me know what you think of that. Did you get any enjoyment out of these films? Or what films out there do you think are pretty trashy but very good at the same time? I'd love to know. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.